we're going to dig into a little bit of deal review today, just so you can see what it's like when we get a deal from our inbox, what that conversation looks like with the broker, how that kind of conversation goes via email, and then what it looks like for us to review the deal, how we're going to give it a quick glance, what our overall thoughts are on the property, where the opportunity is, and whether or not we decide to move forward to actually giving it a proper underwriting. So we're going to dig into 2 deals that we have in Orlando, and it'll give you guys a really good insight into how these crazy brains think about real estate. So let's kind of go into deal number 1. Boom, deal.
And while Travis pulls that up, the primer for how we generally structure our deal flow is Travis is the broker relations guy. He's kind of step 1 of the process. Very good at handling transactions. It's his day-to-day business anyways. So he gets to screen these deals for me because I wouldn't have all the time in the world to underwrite all these. So he is doing more of what you want to call a qualitative analysis of the deal, unit count, overall deal size, vintage, kind of the things we've spoke about, a little bit. And once those check the box, zip codes, those types of things. Once that 10-minute highlight reel of boxes we need to check is complete and it looks good, goes my way. And then we probably have a conversation like this, honestly. Hey,
Yep.
This one looks good. Pretty much what happened today. We got 2 deals, Dave, in the pipeline. Let's kind of pick at them. We're going to have this talk, essentially, bounce ideas back off each other, and then what will happen after today is I'll get in the weeds for a few hours on each deal and put some numbers together, if we think they're good after today's conversation, of course.
So here's a little bit how it works. We will get an email from a brokerage group. First off, we have to know the brokerage group. We have to kind of have done a little bit of business with them. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but we like to work with people we've worked with before.
Yeah.
So we have a couple groups that we're in really good relations with. We're on their email distribution, and we take deals on the market all the time. There's nothing wrong with competition in real estate, and we find seldomly that the big deals that are worthwhile are transacting off market. They'll typically transact on market to get the highest possible price and the best terms for the seller. So we get our deals on market, and it'll look a lot like this. So I get an email from a broker sharing this deal with me, and the first thing I'll do is, number 1, I look at the property first. I take a look at it and I say, does this meet the aesthetics of a property that we think we will have a tenant who will want to rent here? Is this something I want to own where I think that we're going to have a good rent velocity? That's the first question. The second one is, what's my unit count? We need something over 100 units to make sense for us economically, because we have to hire on-site management to lease. We have to have property management to manage the property. We have to have handyman. We have to have mechanics. So we have to employ so many people here. At a small scale of 90, it might not make sense. So we need unit counts minimum 100. So this is a 248 unit property. The property looks good. The vintage is 1988. That's kind of right in our wheelhouse. We like something a little bit newer, but we'll take a little bit older. So that's right in our wheelhouse. 248 units, 1988 build, looks pretty good. And we have 75% of the units that are in classic condition with an opportunity to raise rents on average like $300 per unit. So we have our value add there as well. So what I'll do is I'll quickly look. What is our average monthly in-place rent? For this property, it's $1,600 a month. So I'm playing the number in my head. Okay, if I have on average, if I have $1,600 a month, and if I could get $300 rent premiums, this is not great math, but this is quick math. This lets me know where I'm working with. I know, okay, I'm at $1,900 per unit. So with the 1% rule, I'm really going to want pricing to land somewhere around $190 a door. So I'm already looking at, I need my economics to be $190,000 per door for me to really get somewhat interested in this property. So the next question here is, I'll email the brokerage group. I'll say, hey, name, thank you for sharing this property. What is the pricing guidance here? Simple question. You don't need to get into a whole lot. These brokers are busy. We're busy. What's pricing guidance here? They'll usually get back to us pretty quickly. And for this one, he said, hey, Travis, $48 to $50 million price range. Great property. So it's good that he thinks it's a great property. I'm sure he thinks it's the greatest property in the world, the best property you've ever seen in my life. So I'll take those numbers, and the quick calculation is $50 million divided by 248. So we're just north of $200,000 a door. And I had it in my mind, I need to be at like $190 a door. So we're very close. It looks like we are close enough to be able to underwrite this. So that's the quick numbers where it's like, hey, does this maybe make sense? Then I take a look at unit breakdown. That's very important. I see how many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms we have, just because we understand this Orlando market and we know that there is a super premium for 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom units. So the more we have, the better it is. So let's run into this offering memorandum. Take a look at our unit breakdown. If I have it memorized correctly, I think we have 58 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom.
Top of my head too, I like that it's only 2-story here. There's
That's
no
a
3-story.
good observation.
Yeah.
So
I personally like that. Easier
makes a
for
really good
move
point.
outs,
Yep.
easier for accessibility.
Where did you see that here? You just like saw that?
Right at the top, right? First page, I think it was all 2-story.
Good observation here, Dave. So it's 2-story, what they call 2-story garden asset. A lot of times, like Dave mentioned, they'll have 3-story, and these older buildings are non-elevated. So it's way easier for move-ins, move-outs. You have 1-story, 2-story. Once you have that 3rd story, you actually have a pricing discount because there's walking up. It's like, imagine if you're in an apartment in New York City. It's way more valuable to be on the 2nd floor of a walk-up than the 5th floor of a walk-up.
Yeah,
so
most of the Orlando garden assets are breezeways, like they are in a lot of like the South. So it's staircases, not an elevator. Obviously, garden, you wouldn't put an elevator in all these buildings. So it makes a difference. You wouldn't think it's something you always have to consider, and we don't like consider it a deal breaker. But I see this, and it goes, oh, that's kind of like a plus, like right off the bat for me. So I'm not saying this is a winner deal.
What that tells me too is with our value adds, we may be able to get true value add. There may not be a discrepancy between the classic units and the renovated units getting $300 increase per unit. Where the question I would ask myself is, great, how many of those units are on the 1st floor, 2nd floor, as opposed to the 3rd floor? Because they may be touting that they get our price premiums on the 1st and 2nd floors, but on the 3rd floor, you're probably not getting that same price premium. So with Dave's observation there that I didn't even see on the first go-around, that lets me know that we're probably very true to our premiums that we're going to get in our rents, because we're not dealing with this variable of having to have a 3rd floor on the walk-up. Mm-hmm. So great observation on Dave's point. And another thing that we like, I mentioned before, we have 75% of these units are in classic condition. That means like circa 1988, circa mid-1995, where they have, I don't want to say ugly, but just a dated feel, where you have cabinetry that's like, you know, a light brown, not that appealing, white appliances, just everything's dated. When we renovate that, it looks really good to a prospective tenant. They're excited to rent, and it makes for a better overall product, and we could charge for that. And that's the objective of value add real estate. We add value, and it allows us to receive more income through our efforts. So a property like this looks really appealing. They have fenced-in patios for every unit, really nice sprawling properties, about 20 acres. The next thing we'll do in this process is we'll take a look at the unit breakdown. We have 58 total 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms. That to us is a good number. The deal that we have pinned in our mind is the property that we own in Orlando. That property is 186 units with, what was the number on the threes on that?
It was like near 35% or something like that, like
Yeah.
60 something.
The 60 something.
Call it a third, 40%.
So we
something
like
that.
to have the more 3-2s, the better, because those things you can't hold on to those in Orlando. It's actually a big family market in central Orlando, which is where we focus. And we know our 3-2s are our money makers. Mm-hmm. So finding a property like this that has a decent percentage of 3-2s is really appealing for us. That lets us know that we're going to get that price per unit. We're going to be able to push that price per unit pretty aggressively. Are we going to get our average in-place rents to $2,000? Eventually, yes. The answer to that is eventually yes. Mm-hmm. How soon? We don't know. That's kind of for us to figure out in our calculations. But overall, with these little qualitative things, this leads us to say that this is an interesting market. The next thing we'll do is we'll Google the property. We'll see what's around it. What kind of major employment hubs are there? What kind of retail operations do you have? Or do you have your kind of like C-class, B- class sort of retailers? Or are you going to have your B to A retailers, which would be like a Whole Foods, which would be like Super A+, Starbucks, Super A+.
Usually Publix down in Florida.
Publix is absolutely beautiful. I see a Publix, I get excited. I can't even look at that,
Everybody loves a good pub sub,
that little X at the end of the Publix. Oh, greatest thing in the world. I love seeing Publix. But so we'll look at the area, and this area, let's take a quick little goog. Let's throw a little goog on this property.
Yeah, so basically, at this point, deal is starting to check out qualitatively now is the like Travis is saying, the kind of market demographic portion of it, we at a high level like the deal, just from 10 minutes. We don't love this deal. We don't really know it yet. But now let's do that 10-minute dive of do we like the zip code? Do we like the tenant base? Do we like the employments?
So reference point wise, this is a little bit more east than we had been looking, a little more east than the property that we have. Mm-hmm. But let's kind of drive into this area a little bit. One thing that I love about this property, and this is a huge winner here, is the natural source of traffic we are going to receive, as this property is right off of a major drive-through 551. Major throughway, two sides of traffic driving right by the property. What Dave and I have realized through our years of investing is that frontage is everything. If you have a property that is right up on major sources of traffic, you have to spend less money on apartments.com. You have to spend less money on any online advertising because you have natural traffic. We love natural traffic. We think this is priced with that in mind, but natural traffic, having people drive by your property every day, that is the best advertising. We love that. This is something that's super intriguing. Definitely a plus on this opportunity. So that alone, this says to me like we got a cool little opportunity. And then when I drive by it on Google, I see that their signage isn't even that great. They don't have signage that is massive. I think we could make our signage a little bigger to attract
I saw
people.
the leasing sign like 100 yards back.
Yeah, we also have
that's a weird
exactly.
Sign,
so I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunity with a property like this. And then we also look into apartments.com so you can see some pictures. We'll look into CoStar. CoStar owns apartments.com. They aggregate everything. So we have pretty much everything from apartments.com within the property. And when I took a look at it on CoStar, everything looks really good. One thing that I noticed is that the clubhouse has super high ceilings. The fitness center is pretty expansive. They have really cool amenities. They already have a built bark park so people can go walk their dogs in a certain designated area. They have playgrounds, a really nice pool. So we have amenities, a rich set of amenities that are already going to appeal to tenants. We just need to make it look a little bit nicer. This is the kind of the qualitative thing. This is stuff that I bring to Dave so he could really crunch those numbers and say, okay, maybe we could push the price a little bit because we have this qualitative edge. So then at this point, I'll kind of hand it off to Dave and he'll do all the numbers.
That's all it is, just a bunch of tapping around.
At this point, I just imagine he just bing, we got a deal. So this to me kind of puts us to the point where we're like, okay, this deal's interesting. Let's see how these numbers shake out a little bit. So what other questions will you ask on the preliminary part of a deal where you're saying, okay, now it's worth it to invest the time to underwrite this?
We haven't sliced this deal apart yet, but one thing we kind of like to do is take it from the approach of how can we just kill this deal within 15, 20 minutes? So, scrolling through this deal, is there any just immediate red flags of that's a deal breaker for us? Clearly we can't spend hours on me underwriting, hours on us traveling to get this deal done. You can't do that on every deal. You would never look at enough deals to win any of them realistically. So on this one so far, within the 10 minutes or so we've talked, nothing that we're really seeing that is a red flag that says, oh, we shouldn't even move forward on this thing.
I may be able to kill this. I may be able to. I'm not going to
shoot.
I don't want to kill the deal. I never want to kill the deal.
You got to try though.
But of course. Dave says kill the deal, and he's totally right. Yeah. Our objective is to kind of we're pushing the deal forward. If it dies, fine. And if it doesn't die, heck yeah, we got a deal. Yeah. But Dave is right. We need to aggressively find the points that are going to make this deal not viable. One thing that I saw is that the vacancy may be a little bit high. It looks like we're 90% occupied on CoStar. The narrative may be different in the offering memorandum for the brokers. It usually says the occupancy rate of the property or the vacancy rate. Let's see if we could see this here. That's one thing I noticed. I saw it was about 10% vacant, which is a touch high for Florida. We tend to float around, where we're at 95% occupancies all around Florida, right?
Yeah,
roughly.
Plus or minus. You might have to scroll down to the trailing data to see if they have, we might have to do some math here quick.
A lot of times they tout the certain occupancy, and the fact that they haven't touted a high occupancy rate is, I'm not going to say troublesome, but it's what are they leaving out? There's always something that's omitted from an OM, and it kind of tips you in onto, where are my clues? Where's our red flags here? Mm-hmm. It could be the occupancy, and then our next question would be if it is 10% vacant, our question would be, why is it 10% vacant, and does it have to do with the high pricing?
And we don't mind low occupancy, to an extent. It could mean bad management, which is a plus for us because that means we can normalize up to a better standard of, like you're saying, 95% or something to that effect. So we don't mind that if it's in the low 90s.
So you must have a certain occupancy in order to qualify for the debt. These sellers are going to juice these properties to make sure that it's teed up for any financing. So this looks like it was just teed up. To me, there's a little bit of caution. Why 90%? That's a question I'm asking myself.
And one thing looking forward on this deal, just talking about take a step back, look at the chess pieces. All right, so these guys have 90% right on the line. What's going to happen? They're going to try to bump that up 2-3%. How are they going to do that? Probably be less decisive on who they rent to. Probably maybe do some concessions, what have you. We may end up with a slightly, marginally dicier tenant pool than we originally would like on this deal versus them being choosy and getting the right tenant base in there. They might be getting people in there who are slightly underqualified. Maybe just a bunch of scenarios where they're just doing whatever it takes to get 2-3% more of the units filled, so that they have some buffer room so that this deal can close. So just something to keep in mind too.
So, were we able to get to this point of granularity 2 or 3 years ago? Probably yes. 5 years ago? Probably not. So with all this comes experience. What me and Dave were looking for when we were first looking for a deal is where are the landmines? We're just combing through all these little elements to say, what could go wrong for us? And Dave brought on a good thing. We may be jumping into potential bad debt in the future where, since ownership wasn't selective with their tenants because they needed to juice up their occupancy rates, we may be inheriting some rough tenants here. So that's something for us to think about. We're looking at a 90% occupied property, 10% vacancy, kind of low for us. Now we have something to ask the broker. Now as we're going through it, we're going to say, tell us a little bit about the vacancy rate here. And that's just another good question for us to have. And it's also opportunity for us. We understand this market. We know that we could get ourselves to 95. Maybe they're doing something wrong. They've touched on it before. Maybe it's operational. Maybe their management isn't so great. So many variables here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so how a deal like this would flow, usually, any deal. We'll get that rent roll, we'll get the trailing data, kind of early on in the deal. If we progress to this deal, it's going to take a month plus. We'll get updated numbers. So I would expect that 90% occupancy to jump up to the 92, 3, maybe even 4, like I mentioned. Maybe not that high, but you get the gist. An unsophisticated group, not that we have all of the years' experience, but we've seen a couple things. A younger group may look at that and say, oh, great, you got your occupancy up. But my first question is going to be, okay, but who did you rent to? Who's qualified for that last 3%? What happened there? Because what I may start to do in the underwriting to tailor that in the further versions of this deal would be to say, okay, you guys bumped up occupancy, but the bad debt, like you mentioned, may go up. So I might have to forecast higher bad debt for the first year than I originally would, because instead of having 93 across the board, dated back a couple of years, it went from 90, jumped up to 93, and now we're going to have some issues going forward with leasing, or collections rather. So just something to kind of a nuance of a deal there. We might have some choppy few months trying to get the right tenant pool in place.
So overall, the deal looks good. There's elements that we really like. There's a couple elements that are, raising a couple flags. So now we're going into this, at least with an understanding of what we're getting into. So next steps here is that Dave would get a couple numbers, and we would ultimately determine on a numbers basis, how would this deal look to an investor. That's always how we put deals together. We tend to have a 5-year time frame on the deal from acquisition point to disposition point, and within that 5-year time frame, we're asking ourselves, how much money are we going to generate per year in each 5 years, and what does it look like when we sell the property at the end of year 5? And then we kind of amortize those numbers out, and we create what's called an internal rate of return. So when you get a big sale on the back end of your 5th year, you kind of want to get some sort of blended average on what your return is going to look like per each year. And what we try to do is generate something close to 20%, let's call it 20% average annual return, which isn't necessarily the internal rate of return, because the internal rate of return factors in opportunity cost, factors in, let's call it
time value of money.
Time value of money, exactly. So that's how we look at a deal. So Dave's going to underwrite the deal with that vantage point, and we're going to get a number. If it's a number that we like, great. We're going to dig in a little further. If it's a number that's really far off, we're going to look through our numbers again, make sure we didn't miss anything, and then we'll review the deal. And if we're not getting even close to an investable product, we'll say thank you, but no thank you, and we'll move on to the next deal.